Welcome to the Connect Your Health to Life coaching podcast. I'm your host, Seth Lusk. I'm a master certified self-image coach and empowered health coach with a decade-long background working in the health and wellness industry. If you're anything like me or the clients that I work with, then you're probably struggling with body image, self-image, or confidence issues. You're probably also trying to figure out why it is that you have these amazing desires for living your healthiest and most fulfilling life, but you can't seem to create consistent actions in your life to reflect those desires. So join me as we dive in deep on what it means to live a fulfilled and authentic life. We're going to look from the perspective of an empowered mindset and uncover reasons why you might be what's holding yourself back from living your most fulfilling life. I'm going to break through some of the biggest illusions and myths that we've all been taught to believe along the way. And I'm so excited to have you with me on this journey. So my only question for you is, are you ready to start living your most authentic and fulfilling life once and for all? Then let's get started, shall we? Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. For those of you listening in for the first time, welcome. You picked an interesting topic to listen in on, whether you're listening for the first time or the 62nd time today. That's right, we're on episode number 62. So excited, guys. The numbers are racking up here. I've got so many topics that I want to talk to you all about, and then every time I talk to you all about a topic, it brings up other topics I want to talk about. I'm just full of things that I want to share with you guys and get out there and help with insight, understanding, awareness, and offer some sense of empowerment to you all in your lives, even if I'm not coaching you directly. I find that my clients that coach with me directly, there's some more benefit to coaching with me directly than listening to the podcast or reading my book. But, for those of you who are not yet sure about wanting to work with me, that's what this podcast is here for, is to put out some guidance out there, to put out a light, to put out awareness, to put out support in any way that I can for those of you who either don't know about the investment in coaching, but you still want to know what coaching is all about. What is it that I do and I help people with? So that's what I'm here for. And yes, you heard me right, guys. I also mentioned reading my book. So I'm going to put a quick little plug in here in my podcast this week because I didn't last week. I wanted to wait until all versions of the book were available. So as of right now, there is an ebook version, there is a paperback version, and then there is a hardcover version of my book available on Amazon. So if you haven't already ordered your copy, go over and do so. My friends, it's a great book. I spent 6 months writing this book for you all. It's 390 pages and 10 chapters long. It is full of support and insight and my lived experience. It's sort of autobiographical as well as self-development, self-help kind of book. And the title of the book is What I Really Want Is ... but I'm just too full of ... And the book is about all of the things in life that we truly want, but we don't see. We don't see because we don't see our true purpose in life. We don't see our true selves in life. And so what we end up doing is filling ourselves up on these cheap substitutes and distractions. And then even if we're able to see what it is that we truly want, we're just too full of those distractions and those substitutes to give ourselves what it is that we truly want. So that's what this book is about and what you can begin to do about it in order to stop distracting yourself and stop gorging on all of these distractions and substitutes. In the book, I talk as if I'm sitting in a restaurant and the menu is sitting right in front of me, and what I really want is on the menu, but I won't even really look at it. I keep going to the buffet line of distractions and substitutes and filling myself up on them, but still feeling so hungry, even though I'm bloated and full with all of these distractions. So that's what the book is about. Really exciting to write the book for you all, and I'm already receiving some amazing feedback from people who have pretty much already read the book, even though it's been out for, I think, about 2 weeks now. So some people that have already bought a copy are almost finished with the book, and they're telling me, they love it, that it's an easy but great read. It's full of momentum and excites you to want to keep reading. So I'm excited to hear that. I want to hear from anyone else out there who might be reading my book, or if you order a copy of my book and read it, hit me up. Let me know what you think. I'm in the process now of working on a second book. So any constructive feedback that I can get that can go into the second book, I'm open to hear. Constructive feedback being the key here. Now, if you just want to write me a letter and be like, you suck as an author, you shouldn't be writing, you're welcome to write that. I probably won't reply, but you're welcome to tell me that you think I suck as an author, because apparently some people think I'm quite good at it, and I believe that I make a great author. So I love you all. Go get my book. Now let's move on to what we're here to talk about today. So you may be looking at the title of this podcast episode and scratching your head, because this isn't a word that we use very frequently to describe what it actually is, and it's a word that we avoid anyways because it's very uncomfortable for most of us. Today we're talking about dissent, and not descent, like as in going down from something, descending. We're talking about dissent, D-I-S-S-E-N-T, which means when we express or have an opinion that is differing or in contrast to or the opposite of what the majority believe or think, or is their method of doing something. So dissent, if you can imagine, is kind of like a diversion from the majority. And we're going to talk about that today, as well as how persuasion ties into this, how our definition and the way we view persuasion is causing a lot of the issues with why we are afraid of dissent and why we are resistant to it. So yeah, that's what I want to talk to you all about today. Let's dive right in. I've got a lot to say. My outline today is about 23 pages long, so I've got a lot to cover here. And I want to start off by talking about what are majority opinions. It sounds obvious, like, duh, we know what a majority opinion is. But let's clarify here. What is a majority opinion? So majority opinions are typically, what we can also call them is group thinking. It is when a larger portion of a selected group arrive at an agreement upon a specific belief, a specific view, course of action, etc. Majority opinions carry a lot of appeal to humans. And there are some positive sides to them. However, when we have majority opinions, there are also some sides to them that are a bit dangerous. So some positive sides to majority opinions. When we have majority opinions, more people are likely to cooperate and contribute to a common good. Also, we tend to feel more secure, more connected, more alike each other with the group when there is a majority opinion. Now, as I said, there are some downsides to majority opinions, and I want to talk about those today too. So the downsides, people who have differing ideals or opinions or processes, we tend to alienate them and disempower them. We tend to criticize them, cast them out from the group. And we're going to discuss later how this feeling of being disempowered and alienated, it's not actually true. But for now, I just want you to recognize that many people who carry a differing view from the majority, when they think it, or if they express it, or even if they just think it without expressing it, a lot of times they feel alienated or they feel disempowered by even just having the dissenting view. Okay, so another way in which majority opinions can have a downside or be slightly destructive is many times in majority opinions, this kind of mentality, there exists this lack or neglect to think critically and independently. And I want to say, don't get me wrong here. There are times and contexts in which people think individually and independently, and they reach a conclusion, and then when they speak together as a group upon these conclusions, the majority of people have independently reached the same conclusion. And when the people involved in reaching this common conclusion have enough knowledge and experience with the topic of the decision, then in this case, majority thinking is actually quite productive and powerful. But there's another side to majority thinking that can become quite insidious. And it's when the group thinking comes to this majority opinion without the individuals that are involved, that the majority opinion have at the time, that these individuals didn't go about reaching that decision with freedom to independently arrive at their own conclusions before collaborating those opinions together to create a group conclusion. So instead what happens is there's this pressure of wanting to fit in with the group and remain connected and not feel alienated and not see ourselves as there being something wrong with us or different. And so we'll just kind of like go with the flow and choose to blindly believe what the consensus of the group is so that we can feel like we fit in. So In many ways, group thinking, the majority opinion, can actually stifle independent critical thinking. And this is dangerous because when we do this as a group, entire portions of lived experience and reality become neglected, looked over, rejected, alienated from the majority opinion, excluded, and this leads to a lot of ignorance, a lot of dysfunction within the group and its majority opinion. It also leads to a lack of quality in the decisions being made by the group. Okay? So many times majority opinion is reached at the cost of critical thinking. It is reached due to the desire to be a part of the tribe or a part of the group or to quote unquote just get along. And I'm actually reading a book about this right now, and it's super fascinating and exciting. And this is what actually kind of sparked me wanting to hop on here and talk to you all about this. Because what I'm reading in the book, I'm like, yes, that's what I've been trying to talk about. This is what I'm saying here. These majority opinions, it's not that they're bad, but they do have this side to them when we're not aware of our human tendencies and where they come from and our fear of dissent, they can become quite destructive. So this is the side of majority opinions in which we fall into many times as humans, is this destructive side. We chase the desire for being a part of a tribe or a group so intensely. We want to fit in, we want to just get along, that we don't realize ourselves rejecting our own thinking and our own lived experience, as well as other people's thinking and their lived experience, and alienating ourselves from each other, disconnecting ourselves from each other, and not allowing ourselves our own true opinions, all for the sake of being able to be part of this majority opinion and feel more part of the tribe, feel more part of the group, and feel like there's less risk of us being alienated from the group. But what I want to say is this comes at a really terrible cost for the group. And it also creates a huge weakness in majority opinions that we seem to overlook more often than not. And we're going to talk about that weakness a bit more later. For now, let's move on to talking about dissent and what dissent is. So what is dissent? Dissent is the holding or expressing of thoughts, beliefs, opinions, or processes that are at variance with those that are commonly or officially held at the time. So dissent is when there is a common belief or opinion, or in other words, the majority opinion, and the dissent would be anything that falls outside of that majority opinion. It doesn't necessarily have to be the opposite, but it contrasts it a little bit. It surrounds the majority opinion. It's not within the circle of the majority opinion. Okay? So why is it that we as people, we resist the idea of dissent? But not only do we resist the idea of it, we resist expressing dissent or the expression of it. So I think in order to understand this, it comes down to first understanding that there are basically two sides on which we can resist dissent. Now, there may be more sides to this, but there are two sides that I see here that I want to talk about today. And the reasons why we are resistant to the expression of dissent or resistant to the existence of dissent falls under these two sides differently. So why we are afraid of it is going to be a bit different depending on the side. So side number one is the side in which you are agreeing with the majority opinion and resisting the idea that someone else is expressing or having dissent. Side number two is when you are the one with the dissenting opinion and might be afraid to either have the opinion or to express it. So let's talk about these individually. So on side number one, when we are of the majority opinion, I say of, when we choose to believe the majority opinion, because I want you to recognize this is a choice to believe the majority opinion. It's not just something we are, we choose to believe it. There can be many reasons to resist dissent from this side. Okay, so many times we see dissent as being an obstacle to progress when we're on the side of the majority. We think that suppressing or getting rid of dissenting opinions will mean that we can create progress in the direction of the majority opinion to which we have ascribed ourselves to or chosen. Other times, we may see dissent as a sign that we are divided and therefore can't get along. And we want to get along. I know some of you out there think that people just don't want to get along. But believe me, at the core, we all want to get along. But the way we go about doing this and the way that we see getting along is sort of what's creating the major obstacle here. But at our core, anytime I talk with someone, as a coaching client, or just get into deep conversation with them, when I really dig in and we get to the root of their thinking, they want to get along. They want to get along with other human beings. It's not that they enjoy not getting along, that they just want everyone to hate each other and be divided. And, even when we talk about, leaders in our society trying to keep, the people under them divided so that they don't have their power. Believe it or not, even these people that are leading us, that we feel like are keeping us divided, they want everyone to get along, but they're afraid that if they see the truth, that somehow that they'll be the ones that's different and get cast out, and then they won't be the one that gets along, and blah, 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 blah. So they actually want us all to get along. That's a topic for another episode. Anyways. Other times, we see dissent as being scary because when we are sort of ascribed or choose this majority opinion and there weren't any dissenters, we felt this security in the direction to take, this certainty, and what it would produce, and that it was somehow quote-unquote right. And dissent brings back in this idea of this, there's not 100% rightness here. There's not 100% certainty. And we see that as being a bad thing. And so we want to resist that because we think that the goal is to create this ultimate certainty and security in life. But then, as I've said so many times in other podcast episodes, that's an illusion. It's not possible in this life. This life is not supposed to be about security and certainty. Of course, we want it, and that's not a bad thing, but we have to recognize that the way we're going about doing it sometimes is very destructive to ourselves and to other people. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later and why this is actually, a good thing, that dissent creates this uncertainty. But for now, just recognize that if you are agreeing with a majority opinion and resisting dissent, that this could be one of the major reasons why, is that your brain it craves this certainty, this security, this idea of unanimity within the majority, allowing us to create this illusion around us of certainty, sameness, and security. But be clear on that. It is an illusion. Just because you are not hearing the dissenting opinions, or because no one is expressing them out of fear, it doesn't mean that those dissenting opinions don't exist and that there is not truth in them as well. So ignorance of the uncertainty doesn't mean that it's not there. So recognize that the resistance to dissent here is simply one of the brain trying to trick us into this illusion of certainty and absolute security, or right, quote-unquote rightness versus wrongness. So another reason why someone on the side of the majority opinion might be resistant to dissenting opinions is because they are suppressing their own dissenting opinions out of fear of, quote-unquote, being kicked out of the community or the tribe, and hearing other dissenting opinions reminds them of their own and brings that fear up again, and that resistance to expressing their own dissent, which is uncomfortable for them. And this brings me to side number 2, which is the side in which you are not on the majority opinion. You don't choose the majority opinion, you have a dissenting opinion. But you might be resistant to having or expressing it, or in other words, communicating it. So reasons why for this side go back to our sort of biology to be a social mammal. We desire to be part of a group or a tribe. Being in a group or tribe meant that we were more likely to survive. Dissent means that we have a differing opinion or view, which means that we have the opportunity to also see ourselves as somehow being different or defective, or that we don't fit in if we choose to make this mean that about us. So this creates a whole lot of resistance to dissent. Another reason would be fear of the group or tribe finding out and rejecting you, and therefore kicking you out of the group. So this fear of rejection, of disconnection. Another fear is the fear of disempowerment. If your opinion is not of the majority, then expressing it would mean this belief should be able to convince other people to believe your opinion. And if we can't do that, then somehow it's not good enough to express it. And therefore, there's this feeling of powerlessness when considering dissension, because you're making the objective something that you can't do anyways. You can't make people believe something. And therefore, people will feel resistant to dissension because they feel disempowered in their sense of what dissension means. And we'll talk about that illusion a bit more later and why this is an illusion and how it's a bit problematic and how we can kind of work through expressing dissent past this illusion. And this work through this illusion where we prioritize a very sort of closed off view of what persuasion is when it comes to having opinions. If the goal is persuasion to agree, then the dissenting opinion has a lot of work to do to disassemble this giant Goliath of the majority and bring people over to their side. And the truth is that we cannot make a person believe something anyway. So persuasion is a bit of a toss-up in the first place when we use that definition of it. But it seems especially disempowering when we are attempting to persuade from the side of the dissenting or the minority opinion. And this can cause a lot of people to avoid, resist, suppress, or even demonize their own dissenting opinions. So another reason why people may resist dissenting opinions when they're on the side of being the dissenter is shame. Shame that there is something somehow wrong with us that we see things differently. And that obviously, since everyone else sees it one way, there must be something defective about our view and the way we see it from another way. And this causes many people to resist expressing their dissent or communicating their dissent or feeling their own dissent or knowing that they have a dissenting opinion because they feel shame around the fact that they have it. So the question is, what do we do about this? If there's so much resistance to dissent, why don't we just keep resisting it and try to get rid of dissenting opinions? Is there a good side to dissenting and expressing that dissent? And the truth is that while it's scary, while it is uncomfortable, courage, my friends, is taking a step forward in the face of fear, not without it, okay? And when we step forward with courage, there's benefit. There's value on the other side. And the same is true with dissent. There is value in dissent for both sides, either being the dissenter or being of the majority opinion. There is importance and benefit to a dissenting opinion for both sides here. So what is that importance? What is the importance? What is the benefit of expressing, having, and communicating dissent? So, with all of this talk about why dissent seems to be unappealing on the surface, let's talk about this. Why do we want to feel free to express and communicate dissent when we hold a dissenting opinion? Number one, and this one is maybe a bit abstract for some of you, so just stick with me here. Try and understand what I'm communicating here. The first one is that dissenting opinions break the illusion of disconnection and break the illusion that sameness of behavior and beliefs is what is required for us to get along. We are taught so often people that behave differently from us or see things differently from us are different than us. And while the behavior and the beliefs differ from ours, this belief that the person is different from us, the person is different from us, creates some very dysfunctional thinking and behavior between humans when it comes to dissension and groups of people with differing cultures, beliefs, and life experiences. See, we forget that our behaviors and our beliefs are a product of experience and thoughts about those experiences. We are not actually different on a fundamental level. We just have differing experiences with life that have taught us different things, and we perceive them in different ways, and therefore came to differing beliefs about life and the world around us. Allowing dissent, accepting it, seeing it as important, it allows us to lean into this illusion of, you are different than me. And when we lean into it with acceptance of dissent and allowing dissent and seeing the importance of it, we truly begin to see that the person versus their experience of life and therefore their differing behaviors and beliefs, when we lean into dissent, it opens us up to compassion and understanding of a wide variety of lived experiential truth that exists within humanity, and that the people that have those differing experiences, they are not different from us. It breaks that illusion of disconnection. It allows us to see that we are fundamentally the same, that we are all doing our best to make sense of our lived experience in this life. And dissent allows us to fully see each other's humanity and our fundamental and ultimate togetherness, even though our human experience can be so vastly different. The person, the being behind that human experience is the same as us. Even though it can feel and appear so foggy, so muddied, so unclear sometimes through the lenses of our own experience, our own behaviors, our own beliefs, our own thoughts, it can be so unclear to see that. Allowing for dissent, accepting it and seeing it as important and then leaning into it allows us to kind of clear that fog out, clear out that muddied water, and start to see the person behind the dissenting opinion, behind the dissenting behavior, and see what it is that they're truly trying to arrive at, and how we are actually trying to work together in an ultimate way. Okay, so moving on from that, another way in which dissenting opinions are important for us is critical thinking. Okay? Many times within the majority mindset, people have not thought independently based on their own experience, their own knowledge or expertise as to what they truly think or want in certain situations or views or scenarios. Many times people adopt the mindset, opinions, strategy, or story of the majority out of comfort. There is that feeling of, remember, the security, the belonging, the sameness, the connectedness, the safety. And we'll just take on the opinion of the majority to feel those things. Dissent, when expressed, reminds people within the majority that there are other ways to look at this, though, and that there exists truth in those ways of looking at it that are different from what the majority opinion is at the moment. So dissent allows the people within the majority the opportunity to think more independently and critically about the opinion that they hold by being challenged in holding it. For the dissenter, the same happens. Sometimes we can only see our own opinions through a very thick lens of experience, and by sometimes I mean basically all of the time. And it doesn't allow for us to account for other lived experiences. Sometimes expressing that dissent allows for others to show us how our lived experience could create a differing view from our own or their own. And this allows the dissenter, as well as the person in the majority, to have the opportunity to think more critically, more independently about their own view and why they hold it, and how they have arrived at it with this new information, as well as with their old information that they had before hearing the dissenting opinion. On either side, the opinion does not have to change entirely for this to be beneficial. Even if we keep the same exact opinion, it is beneficial for the dissent to have been expressed, because the reason why we are holding that opinion and choosing to keep holding on to it is even more clear for us and critically thought through with more available information. It's more inclusive. Dissent stimulates that more critical thinking and creates more thought through decision on all parts. This results in higher quality of decision making. Even if the decision itself does not change due to the expressed dissent, the quality of the decision, it makes a huge difference, because we're more clear on the why, and we're more clear on inclusiveness, on how to incorporate other ideas into what it is that we believe in our opinion. Okay? So, and this brings me to the next reason why. The next reason why dissension is so important is inclusion opportunity. So another reason for expressing dissent and the benefits is that the opportunity for more inclusion is presented when dissension is communicated. Oftentimes in majority opinions, it is not that the majority wants to exclude, but they're not considering everything And to be honest, we never will be able to consider everything. But this is why dissent expressed is so important, because it allows us to consider more than what we would consider without the dissent being expressed. The majority does not have this time of being presented with areas that they've neglected to consider unless dissent is expressed. Expressing dissent can oftentimes lead the group to create a majority opinion that incorporates or includes part of the dissenting opinion. Sort of a compromise can be possible, or just a more inclusive opinion. It also offers the dissenter the opportunity to be more inclusive in their own opinion by working with the majority opinion to create a more well-rounded, higher quality, and inclusive opinion in the end. Which brings me to the next reason why expression of dissent is important, which is the freedom to independently think. So not just critical thinking, but independently think. So just as with critical thinking, the goal here does not need to be to change the opinion of the majority, or even to change the opinion of the dissenter. Sometimes this can happen over time where the majority of opinion changes to more of the dissenting opinion or the minority opinion. But there's something else more powerful here that can take place, okay? So by expressing dissent, we can shake people out of blindly following a view, whether that be the majority or the minority. But say we're talking about the majority view. So we can sort of shake people awake to seeing that they are blindly following a majority view, even if they don't change their mind. We remind them of their freedom to think independently, that they have the opportunity to arrive at a different or even the same opinion through a process of more independent and authentic thinking, rather than just accepting the majority opinion out of fear. We allow the person to ultimately go through their authentic, critical, independent thinking process to arrive at that conclusion on their own. And like I said, it could still end up being the same opinion that they carried before, but now they're empowered to see, I choose this opinion because of blah, 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 versus just being like, oh, I better not question it. Okay? So the next reason why dissension is important is persuasion to see opportunity. Here's the part where I want to talk about persuasion, my friends, because I mentioned this earlier. Our definition, our view of persuasion is so narrow. Most often when we think of the word persuasion, we think of convincing someone to agree with us in a specific belief. But what if I told you that persuasion is much broader than this, much more powerful than this in a way that we're not giving it credit for? Persuasion is about showing someone opportunity to think differently than they are already thinking. And expressing the dissent or dissenting opinion has power in a situation where majority opinion exists not because it can convince people of the majority opinion to believe something specifically in agreement with whoever is expressing the dissent. It has a much more subtle, much more broad, far-reaching, and more effective power. And that is the persuasion of opportunity or to consider. Before we talk about this further, I want to talk a bit about the illusion of persuasion a bit deeper, and how this illusion of persuasion causes our society to focus on this one particular definition or particular brand of persuasion to be one of convincing another person of a specific belief. So the appeal of persuasion in this definition and the illusion of it, when it comes to persuasion in that definition, is that we have bought into over centuries this experience that has been sort of passed down to associate persuasion with this idea of it being about convincing someone to believe in a specific belief that we hold and want them to hold. So the first illusion is that the group majority opinion is somehow better. Now, again, when the majority opinion has reached a conclusion independently and then consulted each other honestly and maintained their independent views after consulting, and then these independent views arrive at the same basic opinion or conclusion, group thinking can be quite powerful and uniting. But the majority of majority opinions this doesn't occur this way. It occurs through persuasion, and a very small, sort of insidiously destructive brand of persuasion that occurs due to fear surrounding not being a part of the group or a tribe and what it means to not be a part of it. And in this case, majority opinion is not actually a better quality opinion or decision. It is one of blind following. There's no critical thinking. There may be some thinking that occurs when a person convinces themselves of the majority opinion in order to be part of the group, but this is usually done while suppressing and ignoring their own dissenting opinions that they originally held before being in this persuasion act, and then therefore arriving at the decision to just accept what the majority is saying. So agreement with the majority is actually done in this case without independent thinking, and is in fact done with the suppression of independent thinking. So the illusion of persuasion that we carry is one where it is somehow beneficial to convince all people to blindly agree with an opinion for the sake of being part of the group, or for the sake of ease of taking action unanimously as a group. And this brings us to the big illusion of persuasion here, the big illusion of majority opinions, and the big illusion of the fear of dissenting that actually ends up being the Achilles heel of majority opinions or thinking. And this is also where the power of the minority comes in and gets to dismantle the illusion or the quote-unquote power of the majority. So the minority or a dissenting opinion has a massive power that we overlook because of our definition or focus on persuasion being about convincing people to hold the same belief as us, as in something specific. But persuasion, as I said, is a bigger word here. It has a very powerful objective that's much broader. And persuasion is simply about the process of a person moving from believing one thing to being true to believing something else. And you might be thinking, yeah, that's something else being what I want them to believe. But I want you to hold on here for a second before you just arrive at that conclusion. There are billions of other opinions out there between the accepted or quote-unquote majority opinion and your opinion. And there are billions of combinations of the opinions that could possibly take place in all of the surrounding opinions. And all of these opinions contain truth within them. So the danger of majority thinking is the blindness of it, the lack of critical thinking in it, the lack of quality and independent decisions being made. The danger and power of the majority opinion is unanimity, meaning that everyone just agrees. Persuasion's power here, when it comes to the dissenting opinion, is not to cause people within the majority to leave the majority just to believe exactly what you believe. If that is the case, and you have done so through persuasion, without the other person independently thinking and critically thinking and arriving at their own authentic quality decision, then what you're doing is just creating the same dangerous trap of the current majority that you're wanting to dismantle due to its danger of ignorance, blind following, lack of independent thinking, lack of quality in decision making. This is not the goal of expressing dissenting opinions. I know we believe that it is. But when we approach it this way, all we do is we just jump from one majority to another, to another, to another, to another, and we end up in the same trap. The goal is not just to create the same dysfunction with a different view. No. The power here in dissent is using persuasion for its much broader, actual powerful definition. It's much more constructive and effective. The power here lies in showing people and allowing them the freedom to choose independence from the majority. It is to persuade them to open their eyes to consideration and opportunity, to open, to think independently and critically, and to see where they were following a belief blindly and closed off due to fear of exclusion or rejection from the group. The power of expressing dissension is not to get people of the majority to switch to another specific opinion. It is to allow them the opportunity to open to the possibility of billions of opinions. and the freedom to explore them with constructive curiosity, authenticity, and independence and critical thinking that is authentic for them. And why is this so powerful? It's powerful because when you remember the strength of the majority is about unanimity. The desire to belong, the fear of being different, causing people to unanimously agree with opinions without critical or independent thinking that they don't actually agree with when they think independently and authentically. This power is crushed the moment that people within the majority opinion become aware of their own freedom to step out of this. Even if they end up agreeing to the same course of action in the end that the majority opinion was of, they are now open to critical thinking. They are now open to seeing other views and other ways at arriving at the decision to take the same action, a higher quality decision. So the question is, what can we do with this information? What benefit can we take from knowing this and seeing the benefit of dissent? Well, first of all, becoming aware of how our fear of not being a part of the tribe is playing into our decision making. That's the first thing, becoming aware of this. Asking yourself, are you not thinking critically, not speaking up about dissenting opinions, not expressing concerns or other relevant opinions or ideas that are being excluded by the majority opinion? Are we silencing our own authentic truth to try and fit in? Are we sending ourselves the message that there is something wrong with us if we don't entirely agree with the majority and what their opinion is? This awareness in and of itself is already powerful because we now see that we are creating this pattern in our life by choice, not because we have no power. Okay? So the second thing we can do with this is begin to consider how any change that we benefit from now as humans, it started with dissenting opinions. Without that, we would be doing literally the same thing that was popular, that everyone was doing and believed in hundreds or thousands of years ago. Doing things like seeing if someone floats when we tie a rock to their feet and throw them in water, and then being like, oh, they floated, so they're a witch. Or things like slavery. Or things like accepting that infections just mean death and casting people with infections out of the city to die on their own. There are many things that we have changed as humans that we benefit from today because someone was willing to express dissension from the majority opinion. So I want you to recognize that. The third thing we can do is begin to rethink our concept of persuasion. Persuasion is not always about making someone believe what we want them to. The more powerful version of persuasion is to allow the other person the opportunity to see that they are currently believing in something without critically thinking. And open them up to the possibility of them to believe and arrive at a belief independently with their own critical thinking. Whether it still be of the majority opinion or whether it be different from the majority opinion. Whether it be that we follow the same process that the majority opinion is following, but we have differing views of why we're doing it. What is the end goal? And being willing to express that as we follow through with the majority. So the next thing we can all do, and this is going to be tough, I know guys, I know you're going to grit your teeth when I say this, is to begin embracing dissent. Not just our own dissenting opinions. Not just embracing the expression of our own dissent, but also embracing moments where we have chosen the majority opinion and someone else expresses dissent. Let's do a pattern disrupt here when we notice ourselves wanting to resist someone else's dissent, wanting to label them as being hard to get along with or bad or just obnoxious or annoying or shouldn't be part of the group or different than us. And instead of immediately jumping into this conclusion that somehow dissent is a threat and that therefore we need to label the person that is expressing dissent as also being a threat, instead we lean in with curiosity here. And we explore the dissent with the openness that it's actually there to create. The power of dissent lies in its ability to open. As we discussed before, with how commonly we view persuasion as being about making someone believe what we believe, when we take that perspective, that is about closing off possibility. We're taking someone from one closed offness to another closed offness. Group opinion that thrives on unanimity and stifles independent critical thinking. This is about closing off possibility. So the urge or the knee-jerk reaction to immediately stifle, dismiss, disqualify dissent falls in this same closing off of possibility. So what if instead, when we hear a dissenting opinion, we chose to lean in and see this as opportunity to open? Even if we don't change our mind in the end, it is opportunity for us to explore more why we choose to keep believing what we believe, while remembering that other truth still exists out there. It is a great exercise for openness, my friends. And I want to say here, I get it. There are times where we have, these deadlines where it's like we need to start taking action, or we have chosen to take action by this time so that we can reach this goal. And I get it. We don't want to sit in constant dissent without taking action. But here's the thing. We can be taking action while considering dissent. And then as we consider the dissent and we become more open, maybe we decide to change our course of action, but we can be taking action while considering dissent. So it doesn't have to be about sitting in stagnation and no growth and no taking action while dissent is being expressed. And for people out there expressing dissent, just because action is still being taken, that isn't the action that you're wanting, it doesn't mean that you give up on expressing the dissent. It also doesn't mean that you express it in a way that is destructive, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So what I want you to remember here is that dissent doesn't have to mean for us that we're stuck, that we can't do anything until everyone agrees. That's not the point of dissent. We can still take action based on what we best know right now, while considering dissent and learning more. And while we learn more, we can course correct. But I think we get lost in this illusion sometimes that until we know perfectly everything in the world, and as long as people are expressing dissent, that means we don't know everything perfectly, so we're not allowed to take action, because if we take action now, we'll have to realize later that we quote-unquote could have done better. No, my friends, this isn't how it works. We use the information we have now to do our best course of action, and as we learn more information, we course correct, and we offer ourselves our humanity of seeing, okay, yeah, I didn't have this information when I chose that action, but I can do it differently now that I do have this information, instead of judging ourselves for having done something differently before that we want to do differently now. This whole illusion creates so much chaos and creates so much dysfunction and creates so much stagnation and fear of dissent, because we feel like as long as there's a dissenting opinion, we're not allowed to take action, because that means that, if we give truth to this dissenting opinion, that later on we'll have to regret having taken the action we're taking now. And that's not how it works. This is not how growth and learning works, my friends. So we have to break out of that illusion. That's a topic for another episode. So moving on, I just touched on this. So the last thing that we can do when it comes to this information about dissent is we can learn to look at our approach to how we express dissent. Maybe you're someone who is comfortable with expressing dissent, and that's great. But let me ask you, is your motive for expressing dissent to follow that same destructive closing off path of the majority opinion by trying to persuade people to believe exactly what you want them to, instead of what the majority is saying, or instead of what basically someone else is telling them to believe? If that is your goal there is to close off. Or is your goal to wake people up to their freedom to think independently and to use this to arrive at higher quality decision making? The second option asks the majority to split apart and open to more opportunity and awareness, while the former asks for people to leave the majority only to close off to another set of beliefs and opinions, and those being yours. And in the end, you have the same result as before that you were wanting to dismantle. So the real goal here is to create more inclusion, more openness, not closed off, ignorant exclusion of possibilities and truths. So the question is, how do we accomplish this? So for me, what I find is most helpful, and I teach my clients about this, is that when wanting to express dissent, and we realize that what we want to avoid here is using a version of persuasion where we try and put our thoughts in their head, and we want our beliefs in their head, and we want them to arrive at the same belief that we have without, thinking. That we just want them to have the same. So when expressing dissent, while wanting to avoid that, the best method is not to approach expressing dissent by trying to disprove the majority opinion. And I know that's the way we go about it, because we're afraid if we express dissent without disproving the majority opinion, we'll just, be, disqualified, dismissed, whatever, because that's what we've been taught to do. When we hear dissenting opinions and we're on the majority side, we're taught to dismiss them because, oh, no, if we hear majority opinions, we hear dissenting opinions, we're never going to do anything. We got to get rid of dissenting opinions. They're obstacles. They're bad. Okay. And so when we're on the side of the dissension, we're afraid to express them unless we feel like we can dismantle and disqualify and disprove the majority opinion. Otherwise, we're afraid we won't be listened to. So here's the thing. The moment that you try and dismantle the majority belief by disproving it, all you're doing is feeding into that fear of the majority opinion to need to be right. You are, by trying to no, you're wrong because blah, 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 you're just feeding into that fear, which only causes them to hunker down and double down on their beliefs and try and prove you wrong and prove that you're the dumb one, you're the wrong one, you're the bad one, you're the one that should be ignored, not them. When we approach from this right-wrong mentality, we just create more of that separateness, more of that blame gaming. And this doesn't actually work in expressing dissent to arrive at what we're wanting to do, which is open people up to the freedom to think independently and to have higher quality decision making. So how we arrive at this is by asking questions of it. Not disproving it, but just asking questions that put some tiny little holes in the mirage of this airtight, smooth facade that is the majority opinion. So we raise questions that stimulate maybe a little bit of doubt. And by doubt, I mean that opportunity to see, okay, maybe this isn't exactly as bulletproof as I thought it was. Maybe there's more here. But we're not doing it from the perspective of, oh, no, you're wrong. You need to change your beliefs. Otherwise, we do it more from the perspective of curiosity and openness. It's not that the people that have the majority opinion are wrong. It's that they're only looking at a small part of the truth. Can we open them to see more of the truth? That's our goal here. And we do that by asking questions that stimulate the opportunity for free, independent thinking, not forcing people to think differently or being like, you're wrong, you need to think differently, and rah, rah, rah. We're not doing that. So we ask questions that stimulate free, independent thinking as opposed to trying to disprove, disqualify, or discredit the majority opinion. Oftentimes, the route that I see people taking when attempting to express dissenting opinions is one where they try to demean, belittle, degrade, discredit, or slander the majority opinion. And as I said, all this does is causes the majority opinion to double down and try and prove you to be the one that needs kicked out of the group. You're the bad one. You're the wrong one. Because we're coming at it from that scarcity mentality that there can only be one truth here. And it has to be mine. It can't be yours, so it has to be mine. When the truth is, both sides have truth to them. And when we approach dissenting opinions or expressing dissent with that openness to how do we collaborate these two beliefs together versus it being you're wrong and I'm right, or I'm right and you're wrong, let's see who can prove each other wrong. So when people take this approach, it's typically from that approach of persuasion, where the goal is to get the people to agree with their own opinion and take it on as their own, in hopes that their opinion will then become the majority accepted opinions. But remember, when we do this, we are in no better position than what the other majority opinion was in. You have now just created a group of people believing in another belief without independent thinking, that someone else is going to have a dissenting opinion about and come around and then blame you and call you the wrong one and try and prove your belief. So this isn't what we want. We want inclusion. We want openness. So when we recognize that the goal of expression here is not this particular brand of persuasion or right versus wrong, but that the goal here is for the brand of persuasion that gets people to become aware of opportunity to consider. and believe a vast number of possible opinions and arrive independently at our own authentic conclusions. And when we see this as the goal, we can express our dissent in this open and constructive way that stimulates thought, not belief. And you heard me right there. We want to stimulate thinking that other people create their own beliefs through. And what we tend to do is try and stimulate belief. And here's the thing. Sometimes the belief they will arrive at will be one that is very similar or the same as our own once we present the dissenting opinion. But the goal here is to stimulate the thinking that they will then independently use in an authentic way for them to arrive at that conclusion, not to persuade them to believe or to stimulate them to believe something. We want to stimulate them to think. Okay? There's a huge difference here. As a whole, we have struggled so much with dissent as a species because we see the goal as being one of persuasion to believe. When we switch the goal of dissent to being persuasion to think and consider, then expressing dissent becomes more about openness, opportunity, inclusion, not this inconvenient obstacle or an egotistical battle of right versus wrong. So, what do I want you all to take away from this? I have a few things here. Number one is that I want you all to begin examining your idea of persuasion. Is it the one that encourages openness or a closed-off mindset? I want you to examine that. Number two, I want you all to begin examining how often you do not express dissenting ideas out of fear. And then I want you to lean into that fear and find out where you're selling yourself short and disempowering yourself to see that your true unconditional worth is conditional based on your ability to fit into the group. And that therefore you stifle your ability to express dissent because of your fear of the fear of your conditional worth. And that if you express a dissenting opinion, that you will lose worth and be kicked out of the group, kicked out of the tribe. And that therefore you don't express your dissension. I want you to examine that fear there. Where is it coming from? What is the belief there? The third thing I want you all to do is to consider your approach to dissent in the past. Was it one that had a goal of persuasion to believe? Or was it one that had the goal of persuasion to independently think and open? Think about that. Answer that question for you, okay? The next thing I want you all to do is to begin to see and consider that dissent, even when you are on the side of the majority, is important and even necessary for human growth and for quality action and for quality growth and for quality decision making. Dissent is what keeps us free. It's what keeps us open instead of trapped into our own beliefs and the blind spots that they carry with them. Dissent is what frees us from feeling trapped into believing a majority opinion out of fear of being different or having a different opinion. Okay, the last thing I want you to take today, I want you to take this with you, is that when we express dissent, we remember that the goal is to create openness. That we take our approach from an empowered, curious, open, and compassionate mindset. Don't accuse, don't belittle or blame. Pose questions that stimulate a curious, open energy surrounding the topic. Release the idea that the majority opinion is there to be bad or evil. Or if you're on the side of the majority opinion, that the dissenting opinion is there to be bad or evil. There is a reason why people believe what they believe. And we arrive at the truth of that, an openness to other possibilities, by dissenting with the objective to understand and open the conversation rather than to accuse, to persuade to believe, to belittle, to discredit, or to eliminate. Okay? So, dissenting. It's one of our human superpowers, and it goes right alongside and almost hand in hand with curiosity, which I talked about in a previous episode. Dissension asks for us to be willing to speak up and express dissent. It asks for us to do so with an intention to open, not to close off. So, my friends, let's start practicing this brand of dissent and persuasion. Let's start practicing this instead of fearing that no one else will agree with us, and therefore we shouldn't express our dissent. In fact, why don't we start hoping that they don't agree with us right away? Let's start hoping that they go and think and come up with even more new ideas to consider. And in the end, we want to arrive at a decisive action forward as a group. We create high-quality decisions that are open and inclusive and free to question at any time when we do this. Dissent does not mean that we cannot take decisive action as a majority in agreement. Dissent means that we do so with openness instead of fear that comes along with this desire for unanimous persuasion, or this desire for absolute certainty and security. Dissent is powerfully constructive when done with this mindset of cultivating openness, this mindset of breaking through that illusion of absolute certainty and security and unanimity. Dissent is powerfully constructive in the fact that it creates this openness. And openness is where true growth and forward movement happens. All right? I love you all. This is all I have for you all this week on dissent. It's a huge topic, more we could talk about. I'm going to leave this here with you all, okay? I would love to hear your thoughts and comments on this topic, because I feel like it's one that so many of us have so many different views on and struggle with in so many different ways. And I would love to hear about those ways, those experiences with dissent. Or I also, maybe sometimes where you wanted to express dissent, but you were afraid to and didn't. I want to hear about those experiences. How did it go for you? What happened? How did you feel about it afterwards? All right? I would love to hear about your experiences. I would love to hear about your thoughts, comments, questions on this topic of dissent. So reach out, okay? Reach out. I'm here to answer questions. I'm here to help. I'm here to guide. I'm here to listen. So I wish you all a wonderfully open end to your week, welcoming dissent and expressing it with openness. Until we meet again here next week. Ciao. Hey, thank you for listening in this week. I hope you enjoyed the content of this episode. If you did, please subscribe or follow this podcast to receive the newest episodes every week as I bring them to you here on the Connect Your Health to Life coaching channel. Ratings, reviews, and comments are always appreciated. These allow me to know more of what my listeners would like in the podcast and allow for more people who may be searching for a podcast just like this one to find the Connect Your Health to Life coaching channel. If you would like more information about me and the work that I do with my clients one-on-one, then please visit my website at www.slch.ch. Again, that is www.slch.ch. You can also find me on social media on Instagram at SethLusk_coaching. Again, that is SethLusk_coaching. And on Facebook in my free Facebook group community called A Healthy Life Connection. We would love to have you in the group, and it's only 3 membership questions that you have to answer to join. And again, it's entirely free. And if you need any further information or just want to say hello, feel free to send me an email directly at slusk.health@slch.ch. Again, that is slusk.health@slch.ch. Thank you again so much for listening, and I look forward to our next time together. Ciao.